Welcome to Quick Speak the English podcast.
Hello, everyone.
In this episode, we're going to explore something that, well, really affects everyone, the world of work.
That's right. We're going to look a bit deeper than just, the job title and the things you do every day.
Exactly. We want to understand some important, sometimes hidden realities about careers and workplaces today. Things that aren't always talked about openly.
Yeah, many of us think about work in a pretty straightforward way. You get a job, you do your tasks, you get paid. Simple.
But the reality, and this is what we'll explore today, is often much more detailed, more complex.
Definitely. There are lots of unspoken rules, different dynamics that really shape our experiences at work. Understanding these can be really helpful.
So our goal with this podcast episode is to explore these hidden aspects. We want to help you, our listeners, understand these unspoken truths.
Things like how people actually get ahead, how organizations really work underneath the surface, and importantly, how work itself is changing.
Quite a broad topic, isn't it?
It is. It covers everything from why some people seem to climb the ladder faster than others to, the impact of technology on our jobs, and even the different ways people structure their work lives now.
And understanding these things is really useful, we think, for anyone trying to navigate their career successfully in today's world.
Absolutely. So let's start exploring these unspoken truths.
Okay, so the first big idea we should probably look at is one that's very common. The idea of meritocracy.
Ah, yes, meritocracy. The belief that if you just work hard and you're talented, you'll naturally succeed, you'll move up.
Right. It sounds fair, doesn't it? The best person gets the job. Yeah. Success is all down to individual skill and effort.
It does sound fair, and it's a powerful idea in many cultures and workplaces.
But when we look closer, we often find it's a bit more complicated in reality.
While hard work and talent are definitely important, nobody's denying that other factors, things that are less visible, can play a really significant role in who actually succeeds.
What kind of factors are we talking about?
Well, things like a person's background, maybe where they went to school, or their connections, who they know. Sometimes people call this social capital.
Which is different from human capital, right?
Yeah.
Human capital is more about your skills and knowledge.
Exactly. And then there are other things too, like race, gender, maybe even just being in the right place at the right time. Simple luck can play a part.
And we see examples of this sometimes in how decisions get made, don't we?
Yeah, like opportunities that come through informal chats. Maybe a manager gives a tap on the shoulder to someone they know or someone who seems, similar to them.
And it might not even be intentional bias, but the effect can be that chances aren't equal for everyone.
Precisely. And even the systems that seem objective, like performance reviews or, say, standardized tests, can sometimes have hidden biases built into them.
How so?
Well, they might subtly favor one type of personality or one way of working over another without anyone really noticing consciously.
This whole topic can be a bit controversial, can it? Because if you believe only in pure meritocracy, it can lead to blaming people who aren't succeeding.
Right. The thinking goes, they just didn't try hard enough. And that overlooks any potential systemic issues.
And if you think the system is perfectly fair already, then there's no reason to try and change it or make it better, is there?
Exactly. So a more perhaps helpful way to look at it is that success is usually a mix. It's partly your effort and partly the opportunities or maybe the barriers you face because of how the workplace is structured.
Seeing it that way might help us be more understanding, more empathetic.
And it encourages us to think about how we can make workplaces genuinely fairer for everybody.
So for you listening, maybe think about your own workplace. How much do you feel these invisible factors influence things? Is it all about merit? Or are other things at play too?
It's a good question to reflect on.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about something many people find a bit uncomfortable. Office politics and power dynamics.
Ah, yes. Office politics. It often gets a bad rap, doesn't it? Sounds sneaky or unfair.
Yeah, people immediately think of backstabbing or trying to get ahead at someone else's expense.
But, the reality is simpler, maybe. Politics is basically just what happens when you have a group of people, an organization, competing for limited things.
Limited things like,
Yeah.
what? Attention from the boss.
Yeah.
Budget for your project.
Exactly. Or maybe getting the most interesting assignments. These resources are finite, so people naturally try to influence decisions to get them.
And this isn't some new phenomenon, is it? It's probably as old as organizations themselves.
Pretty much. Wherever there's hierarchy and competition for resources, you'll find politics in some form.
And we often see it become more important or maybe more visible during certain times, right?
Definitely. Like during a company reorganization or performance reviews or when big important projects are being assigned, that's when the dynamics really come into play.
And the examples show that those informal networks who you have good relationships with, they can really influence these outcomes.
Yeah, managers might check in with their trusted circle, people whose opinions they value, before making a key decision. It's natural.
So this means someone could be technically brilliant at their job,
But if they don't understand or engage with these informal networks, they might get overlooked.
while someone else may be equally skilled, but better at building relationships and understanding the flow of influence.
They might move ahead faster. It's about having that political acumen, as it's sometimes called.
So it's useful to see politics maybe more neutrally. It's not just about negative stuff.
Right. At its heart, it's about influence. And influence can be used positively, like building support for a really good idea that benefits the whole team or the company.
So it's actually a skill to learn how to navigate these dynamics effectively and hopefully ethically.
I think so. Being aware of how influence works in your specific environment is definitely a skill.
So thinking about your own workplace again,
Yeah.
how aware are you of the power dynamics? Is developing that political acumen something that could be useful for you?
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about something else. The culture of working really long hours and the problem of burnout.
Ah, yes. In some industries, maybe finance or tech, working extremely long hours is almost seen as a badge of honor, isn't it?
It really is, or it certainly has been. This idea, intensified in the 20th century, being constantly busy, was equated with being dedicated and important.
But we're learning more and more about the hidden cost, right?
Absolutely. The cost is significant. It takes a serious toll on people's mental and physical health,
And we're not just talking about feeling tired. This can lead to chronic burnout.
which is more than just fatigue. It involves deep emotional exhaustion, feeling cynical or detached from your work, and, ironically, often leads to reduced productivity. You actually get less done.
And what's really important, I think, is the idea that burnout is often a systemic problem. It's about the workplace, not just an individual failing.
Exactly. It's caused by factors like excessive workload, lack of control, insufficient rewards, or a breakdown of community in the workplace. It's not just that the person can't handle stress.
Like, for example, if a company rewards people just for being physically present for long hours, presenteeism, rather than focusing on the actual results they achieve.
Right. That encourages unhealthy behavior. And major organizations, like the World Health Organization, now recognize burnout as an occupational phenomenon. They link ongoing workplace stress to health problems and poor performance.
This realization has led to some interesting discussions about solutions, hasn't it?
Yes, things like laws limiting maximum working hours or companies experimenting with mandatory time off like sabbaticals.
And the right to disconnect laws we see in some countries, like France, where employees legally don't have to check emails outside of work hours.
Yeah, those are attempts to address the always-on culture, even in places famous for perks, like Silicon Valley.
The free food and games rooms.
Exactly. Those perks can sometimes mask an underlying expectation of constant availability. We hear stories from former employees about anxiety, depression linked to that pressure.
So the conversation seems to be shifting, slowly perhaps, towards sustainability.
I think so. Recognizing that for long-term success, both for the individual and the company, people need to protect their health and energy. Sustainable performance is key.
So a question for you listening. Are you noticing any signs of burnout in yourself or your colleagues? Does your workplace culture support working in a healthy, sustainable way?
It's crucial to be mindful of that. Now, another angle on work effort is this idea of unpaid labor and emotional work.
Right. This is all the effort we put in that isn't necessarily in our job description or counted in our official hours.
What kind of things fall into this category?
Well, staying late to clear emails, maybe spending time mentoring a new team member without any extra pay, or, trying to keep team morale up during a tough project.
It's definitely work, but it often goes unrecognized. Invisible work.
And then there's the specific concept of emotional labor.
Ah, yes. That term came from research, I think, back in the 80s, looking at jobs like flight attendants.
Right. They had to manage their own feelings. Maybe they were stressed or tired to present a calm, friendly face to passengers. That management of feeling is labor.
And we see this everywhere in modern work, don't we? These expected soft skills.
Absolutely. Being enthusiastic, showing empathy towards colleagues or customers, navigating disagreements politely, dealing with difficult clients.
Mm-hmm.
It all requires managing your emotions for the job.
And the pandemic with remote work seemed to blur the lines even more.
Definitely. Juggling home and work life, maybe more check-ins, more communication needed to stay connected, often without any formal recognition or extra pay for that added load.
And this is where it gets tricky because organizations often benefit hugely from this extra effort.
But they don't always acknowledge it or compensate people for it. It's just expected.
Although some companies are starting to change, aren't they? Maybe offering small stipends for mentoring roles or for being culture ambassadors.
True, there are some positive examples. But a lot of this emotional and invisible work is still just considered part of the job.
And it can be draining. Constantly managing your emotions and supporting others can lead to something called compassion fatigue. You just feel worn out from caring.
So think about your own role. What invisible tasks or emotional effort are you putting in? How is that affecting you?
It's worth considering. Okay, point number 5. Let's discuss networking, self-promotion, and this idea of a personal brand.
This is a big one today. The realization that just being really good at your core job often isn't enough anymore.
Right. You also need to make sure other people know about your achievements and the value you bring. You need to showcase it.
It feels like a shift from the past, where maybe humility was more valued. Keep your head down, do good work.
Exactly. But in today's very competitive job market, if you don't actively share your successes, you risk becoming invisible. Opportunities might just pass you by.
And the way people do this has changed massively with online platforms, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. LinkedIn, Twitter, even Instagram or TikTok for some professions. These tools have made it easier, in a way, for anyone to build and manage a public professional image.
But that's also sparked a debate, hasn't it? Is this personal branding authentic? Or is it just creating a carefully managed, maybe slightly fake, persona?
That's the tension. Does constantly promoting yourself online feel genuine, or does it feel performative, like you're always putting on a show? Some people really struggle with that.
And there could be downsides too. Recruiters might use social media to screen candidates.
Which could penalize people who prefer to keep their online presence private or simply aren't comfortable with those platforms. It might also favor people who are naturally more extroverted or digitally savvy.
So networking and self-promotion aren't just casual activities. They take real effort, strategy, and emotional bandwidth.
Definitely. The key takeaway seems to be, yes, mastering your craft, your actual job skills, is fundamental.
But being able to effectively tell the story of your work, to narrate your achievements and make them visible, is becoming equally critical for shaping how people see you and what opportunities come your way.
So, how comfortable are you with self-promotion? Is building a professional presence online or through networking a skill you feel you need to work on?
Food for thought. Okay, let's move on to the impact of technology, specifically looking at workplace surveillance or monitoring.
Technology, of course, has brought huge benefits. Tools like Slack, Zoom, project management software, they help productivity and collaboration, especially remotely.
No doubt about that.
Yeah.
But there's a flip side, isn't there? This constant connectivity can morph into, well, digital surveillance.
Yeah, the monitoring aspect. It's not entirely new, I suppose. If you think back, factories had time clocks punching in and out. That was a form of monitoring.
True. But today's methods are much more sophisticated.
Absolutely. We're talking about things like keystroke logging, tracking everything you type, software that monitors screen time, how active you are on your computer.
I've even heard of software that analyzes the tone of emails to gauge employee sentiment.
Yes, that exists. And the shift to remote work during the pandemic really amplified this. The use of monitoring software surged.
Often marketed as wellness trackers or productivity enhancers.
Right. We saw examples like warehouse workers using wearable tech to track movements and efficiency. It raises some thorny questions.
Like, when does necessary oversight cross the line into feeling like, well, like Orwell's Big Brother? Where's the boundary?
And the temptation for managers to just police when you're online rather than focusing on outcomes.
There's pushback though, right? People are questioning this.
Yes. Labor unions, privacy advocates are raising concerns. We see things like the right to disconnect laws again. And regulators, especially in Europe and some parts of Latin America, are scrutinizing data collection practices more closely.
It's important to remember the positive potential of tech too, though.
Definitely. Flexibility, working asynchronously, AI potentially automating tedious tasks so humans can focus on more complex, engaging work.
So the key seems to be distinguishing technology that genuinely empowers employees from tech that feels primarily invasive or controlling.
And transparency is vital. Employees should know what's being monitored and why.
Thinking about your work.
Mm.
How much do you feel your activities are monitored? And how can you leverage technology to genuinely help you, not just measure you?
Okay, let's talk about the gig economy and these non-traditional work arrangements.
Right. The rise of platforms like Uber, Upwork, freelance marketplaces.
Hmm.
This idea of micro-entrepreneurship.
And the appeal at face value is strong, isn't it? Freedom, flexibility, be your own boss, set your own hours.
It sounds great. And while we've always had temporary workers or day laborers,
Digital platforms scaled this up massively, sometimes faster than the legal or social safety nets could adapt.
which created this kind of gray zone, didn't it?
Exactly. Many workers are classified as independent contractors, not employees, which usually means
No benefits, no healthcare provided, no retirement contributions, no unemployment insurance if the work dries up.
right. Now, proponents highlight the flexibility, the opportunity. You can deliver groceries, do some freelance writing, fit work around other commitments.
But critics point squarely at the downsides. The precarity, the lack of stability.
Yeah, data often shows income for gig workers can be really volatile, changing significantly week to week. That makes financial planning incredibly difficult. Job security is often minimal.
And there's the argument that companies benefit by shifting risks onto the worker and potentially avoiding things like payroll taxes or minimum wage requirements.
We are seeing responses, though. Class action lawsuits trying to reclassify workers, protests, legislative proposals trying to set minimum pay rates, or define who counts as an employee based on the level of control the platform has.
And alongside this, we hear more about portfolio careers.
Right, where someone intentionally combines multiple part-time roles, freelance projects, maybe a small business, instead of one full-time job.
That sounds like it offers variety, but probably requires a lot of self-discipline.
Absolutely. Financial planning, constantly marketing yourself to find the next gig, it's demanding. And we have to remember, for many people, gig work isn't really a choice for flexibility. It's a necessity because traditional, stable jobs are hard to find.
So if you're considering the gig economy, or you're already in it, what does that balance between autonomy, being your own boss, and security, having stability and benefits, mean for you personally?
It's a crucial calculation. All right, let's touch on diversity and inclusion, or D&I, initiatives.
We see a lot of companies talking about D&I now, launching programs.
Yes, there's much more awareness. But a sobering truth that often emerges is that organizations don't start from a neutral point. Historical discrimination often means biases are already baked into the systems.
How does that connect back to meritocracy, which we talked about earlier?
Well, if you talk about merit or who's best, without acknowledging these embedded biases and how we evaluate people or provide opportunities, you can unintentionally perpetuate exclusion. The playing field isn't level to begin with.
In the past, discrimination was often overt, right?
Yeah.
Women barred from certain jobs, minorities confined to specific roles.
Exactly. Today, the biases are often much more subtle but still impactful.
Like what kind of things?
Maybe job descriptions using language that unconsciously appeals more to men, or networking events scheduled at times that exclude parents or caregivers, or evaluation criteria that favor a more traditionally masculine, assertive style.
So genuine inclusion isn't just about hiring diverse people, getting different faces in the door.
No, it's much deeper. It's about critically examining every aspect of how the organization functions. Who sets the meeting agendas? Who gets mentored? Who gets nominated for promotions or high-profile projects? Whose voices are actually listened to in decision-making?
What about things like unconscious bias training? Does that help?
There's some debate there. It can raise awareness, which is good, but studies sometimes suggest it doesn't always lead to long-term changes in behavior, and occasionally it can even provoke a backlash if not done well.
So what might be more effective?
Often it's about structural changes. Things like blind resume reviews, removing names and identifying details initially, setting clear, measurable diversity goals, and holding leaders accountable for reaching them.
And understanding intersectionality is important too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Recognizing that people have multiple identities, race, gender, class, disability, sexual orientation, etc., and these intersect to create unique experiences of privilege or disadvantage.
Ultimately, the goal of deep inclusion is creating workplaces where everyone feels valued for their whole selves, and the organization benefits from that richer pool of talent and perspectives.
Exactly. So, reflecting on your workplace, how genuinely inclusive does it feel? Are there subtle biases you might encounter? or perhaps overlook yourself.
Okay, nearly there. Let's talk about the psychological contract and job security.
The psychological contract, that's the unwritten set of expectations between an employee and employer, right? Beyond the formal employment agreement.
Yeah, things like trust, loyalty, mutual support, what we implicitly expect from each other.
And historically, say mid-20th century, that contract often involved expectations of long careers at one company, predictable promotions.
And the employer provided stability, maybe even a pension. Lifelong employment wasn't unusual.
But that really started to fray, didn't it? With globalization, economic shifts, more focus on short-term profit.
We saw waves of downsizing, outsourcing. The old deal changed.
Massively. So the current reality for most workers is an expectation of transience. Changing jobs fairly frequently is now the norm.
Some figures suggest people now expect to change jobs every, 2 to 3 years on average?
Something like that. And this has consequences. It can erode trust on both sides. Employees might feel less loyal if they feel easily replaceable.
And it can harm the organization too, right? Loss of institutional knowledge when people leave frequently, maybe a weaker overall company culture.
Definitely. Plus, generational expectations are different. Younger workers, millennials, and Gen Z often seek frequent feedback, meaningful work, purpose. The old model of just loyalty for security doesn't resonate as much.
And when that unspoken contract feels broken, say, through sudden mass layoffs or cuts to promised bonuses, it can really damage morale, even for those who remain.
Absolutely. Rebuilding that trust is hard. Some suggest things like being radically transparent in communications, involving staff more in decisions that affect them, investing in reskilling people rather than just letting them go.
So what are your personal expectations around loyalty and job security today? And what happens for you when that unspoken contract feels strained or broken?
It's a very personal calculation now. Okay, our final point. The future of work, particularly with AI, automation, and human relevance.
This is the big transformation happening right now. AI and robotics are reshaping work across many sectors. It's been compared to the Industrial Revolution, but may be happening faster.
We see it already. Algorithms screening resumes, software writing basic reports, chatbots handling customer service inquiries.
The impact is complex. Some tasks, even entire roles, might shrink or disappear.
New roles are emerging too. People needed to design and manage AI systems, data ethicists, AI trainers, people who work alongside the technology.
So the core question becomes, in a world where AI can do so much, what becomes uniquely human work? What's our value?
Well, the thinking is, while AI might take over routine, predictable tasks, the demand for essentially human skills is actually surging.
Skills like
Creativity, complex problem solving, emotional intelligence, critical thinking, collaboration, ethical judgment. Machines aren't good at those yet, anyway.
So the focus shifts. Humans handle the complex judgment calls, drive innovation, provide empathetic service, manage relationships.
Which means lifelong learning and adaptability become absolutely crucial. Not just nice to have, but essential for staying relevant.
That's a challenge for organizations, how to reskill their workforce, and for individuals committing to continuous learning.
Definitely. And it sparks wider societal debates too. Things like universal basic income experiments, how to ensure AI doesn't perpetuate existing biases. Should there be a robot tax if companies automate heavily?
There are competing narratives, aren't there? The utopian vision of AI freeing us for leisure versus the dystopian fear of mass unemployment.
The reality will likely be somewhere in between and vary across industries. But what seems clear is that human relevance in the future hinges less on performing rote tasks and more on our ability to learn, adapt, connect, empathize, and innovate with technology.
So the final question for you, how are you preparing for an AI-influenced future? What skills do you believe will make you indispensable?
That's perhaps the most critical question for career planning right now.
So we've covered a lot of ground today in this podcast episode. We've looked beyond the surface of the working world.
Yeah, exploring things like the complex reality behind meritocracy, the inevitability of office politics, the real costs of burnout and invisible labor.
The necessity of networking, the double-edged sword of technology, the changing nature of jobs with the gig economy and AI.
Understanding these often unspoken truths, these hidden dynamics, is really valuable as you navigate your own career.
It helps shift the focus maybe from just working hard to also working smart, understanding the systems, prioritizing your well-being, and being ready to adapt.
So, here's a final thought to leave you with. Given this complex, sometimes messy, often non-meritocratic reality of the workplace we've discussed, How might understanding these dynamics change your own definition of professional success or fulfillment?
Thank you so much for joining us for this podcast episode of Quick Speak the English podcast. We really hope this discussion has been helpful for your English learning journey and perhaps given you some new perspectives on the world of work.
To keep improving your English, please do subscribe to Quick Speak the English podcast if you haven't already.
And definitely visit the website. The link is in the description below. You'll find more learning materials there, like vocabulary lists and exercises based on today's episode to help you practice.
Thanks for listening.